Cunningham, and I hopefully have click OK. So we've got Keith Cunningham, the first 5 chapters. If you don't have the chapter breakdown, check out the Facebook page or the Facebook event. If you're not caught up, these are short chapters with a lot of nuggets inside each. And what we typically do is we share ahas from each one of the chapters, because this one is packed with questions. We're going to leave like the last 5 to 7 minutes of every Zoom. And I have typed the focusing questions from the first 5 chapters that you're going to take a look at, and you're get some homework, because that's the goal here, is to get clear and have some thinking time. So what were some ahas from the dreaded dumb tax from chapter 1? What'd you hear? What'd you get?
Business is an intellectual sport.
Yes, it is. I love it. And the opposite of that is how do we avoid emotion, right? So when we get into emotion, drama goes up. And when we stay in intellect, drama goes down. So that really plays for business, especially real estate. Why? Or mortgage or anything, but why especially in our career? Why do we want to avoid emotion?
Well, there's a lot of emotion out there with our clients and reacting to different factors. So we have to keep calm and keep focused with the business.
Yep. And if we can manage the emotion, right, then we get closer to the goal. They make 2 moves in real estate. So they say a physical move and an emotional move. And we want to really get in front of the emotions. And as agents, what we sometimes fail to do is communicate what's next. We forget that we do this every day. They may do this every 3 to 7 years, right? And so they forget what's next, and emotion goes up. So good one, Todd. What else from the dumb tax?
On page 2, down at the bottom, he's quoting a guy. I can't remember his name. I think his name was John, but he talks about that when we're confronted with, do we need to make a change, or can we prove that we don't need to make a change? We usually get busy on the proof instead of asking a question and just remaining in that question and figuring out what we actually need to do, which goes along with the emotion thing that we were talking about before, the whole look good, be right thing. So I thought that was really great.
Yeah. And I love the reminder on page 3, Logan, that says, think and grow rich. It says think, right? And so the secret was right in the title of the book. And so that's the premises of this entire book, is that billionaires schedule thinking time. And he's going to dig more and more in on that. All right. Anything else from chapter 1? Because we'll move into the chapter 2 if not. I told you they're short. All right. Chapter 2 is the discipline of thinking time. And it starts with the Warren Buffett quote. I insist on a lot of time being spent thinking almost every day, just to sit and think. That's a very uncommon thing in American business. I read and I think. I do more reading and more thinking, and I make less impulsive decisions than most people in business. I do this because I kind of like this life. Warren Buffett. So what did you get on the discipline of thinking time?
One of the things, can you guys hear me? I'm driving, so I don't know if I'm in a weird spot.
Yeah, we can hear you.
Gotcha. One of the things I thought was really interesting, and I find happens often when it's either a business discussion or a business book, is things kind of sound like an echo. And everything I kept hearing was like being in bold in Diana's thinking chair. And these are things that we've heard before, and it's, success is simple. It's not easy. So the groundwork is there. We all know that we need to have the time, and yet we get caught up with other things. And it really makes our business suffer. So I think it's really important to time block that time, move from E to P, which is kind of what this, out of the 5 chapters I've got, this is really about, is stop overthinking it, stop being emotional about it, and, follow the people who went before you in the easy, simple process, and you'll be good.
Yep. And I think you nailed it, where if it's not on your schedule, it doesn't exist. And so there's a good story here in the future that I'll save and you guys will get it. But you have to create some white space for this. And I know always when I'm hitting my head on a professional ceiling that I've ran out of white space and I put a lid on my life. And so if we don't get this on the calendar and we don't get some clarity, we're going to stay right where we are. So how do we break through from E to P? And Gary Keller says it all the time. The quality of our life is determined by the quality of the questions we ask ourselves. The bigger the questions, the bigger the life. And a lot of times we just don't take time to go deep and we ask surface questions. And we don't go into first, second, and third questions by going deep enough, right? And that takes practice. If you're a high D, you want to get to solutions, and we skip around asking questions. And one of my favorite ones he says is, what don't I see? Because if you're highly optimistic, you will overlook what don't I see? And that is me to a T for sure. What else did you get in chapter 2?
I'll go.
Yep.
So I know I'm really guilty of, and it's because I'm very like solution-based, project-based, finish-based. And so white space to me, like I feel guilty about it because you don't see an immediate return on it. You don't see, so I find when I have those holes in my calendar, I fill them with, I'm like, oh, great, I have some time. I can get started on this project or I can do this. And I avoid the white space because the white space makes me feel like, oh, I should really be doing something else. You know, so it's really giving yourself the validity that this is what you need to pay off in the long run.
I love that. Good share, Shannon. Anyone else?
Amanda,
Yep.
I love what you said about if it's not in your calendar, it doesn't exist. I started the book a couple weeks ago and I realized I didn't have white space. And so I started adding it, and I was adding it like Friday afternoon. Realized that real quick, that's a bad idea. So I'm moving it, and it's a work in progress. There are some times where it's like, this is beautiful and it was really good time. And then there's other days where it's like, oh, this is not working out well. So I love it. And then also for those, like, what am I going to talk about, or to myself, like, what are those questions? Even just taking one of these chapters and sitting and rereading it because it's super short, and then pondering whatever's in there is my current course of action. So I love it.
I love that too. And I'll just end with this chapter on this note because it's one of my favorite parts. Running the wrong direction enthusiastically is just stupid. When we think about the 5 core responsibilities of a mega agent, which for any career, lead generate, lead follow up, go on appointments, negotiate contracts, and script and role play. And it goes on to say, it does no good to practice the wrong thing. Practice does not make perfect, but instead permanent. To excel, we need a coach or an advisor to watch our swing and provide candid advice about what we're doing wrong and how we can do better. In my opinion, moving into the market of the future, we're going from speed-based to skill-based. And if you're an agent on this call and you haven't dusted off your scripts from the previous market, you better get going on practicing and role playing again. If you don't have a script partner, well, in bold, you're going to get one. But if you don't have a bold coming up, find one. All right, chapter 3, the 5 core disciplines of thinking. So what did you get from this?
The riskiest moment is whenever you think you're right.
Yeah. So I heard something from a wealth building class, Logan, and it said the most expensive line item on your P&L is your ego.
Yeah, it's the truth. And before you move on too far, I wanted to say one thing. That line that you just read about running the wrong way enthusiastically is stupid. Everybody in here knows who Gene Rivers is. I could not help but read that in his voice. Like whenever I read it in his voice, just the way he would say it.
I love that. What else from this chapter? 5 core disciplines of thinking.
I think the golf analogy was fantastic. A double bogey is a bad shot followed by a stupid shot.
Oh, so good. That really helped me cement the second order of consequences. Like, like, oh my God, because I couldn't really understand it until that story. And I'm like, oh, okay, I get it now. You just don't do that. What else? I love that, Todd.
I liked the separate the problem from the symptom. And I think we're all guilty of doing this. And so our grievances might, not be not enough sales, not enough customers, not enough people know about you, can't keep staff, can't find your A-team players. And so really what that is it's a problem and it's a gap that needs to not be addressing the symptom, but building the long-term machine. I like how he kept saying machine, because in my mind, I'm like, we're all parts to a machine to get the result that we need. So I just really thought that was really cool. We could really go into a problem solving, need a solution mode for every single thing when we just need to stop and think and combined it all to one solution.
Yep, and I mean, that's his bumper sticker. Having the right answer is smart, but having the right question is genius, right? And again, we're always in solution. Are we solving the right problem? Are we solving the symptom? And if we don't start asking questions to get to, Diana Kokosta used to say, there's the smoke and there's the fire. And a lot of people are constantly trying to put out the smoke. And then it's like they miss the fire. What's causing the smoke in the first place? Right. And so if you drill down with questions, we get to the fire. I love that. I can't change the environment, only how I will play the game. So how do you need to change the way you're playing the game right now? What's the playbook that we're all running? Is it the same playbook required as our business is starting to change? How are you adapting? All right. What else on this chapter? This was
Last thing on that
longer one.
Was on page 15. I loved when he said, just because you're sweating doesn't mean it's working. And I know we've all felt that sometimes.
Yeah, don't mistake movement for achievement. We can have a bold law for every chapter. What else?
I like the part where he says shoes that don't fit are not a bargain at a new price. I'm a shoe girl, so that resonated with me. Create the machine too. We create wrong machines thinking that we're fixing something. I like that too, Tara, where he just said we create machines to fix what we think is wrong, and it's not really the problem.
Yeah, I love it. All right, anybody else on this chapter? So if we were to sum this one up on the bumper sticker, is misdiagnosing the problem or working on the wrong priority is just simply paying the dumb tax. So we're going to move into chapter 4, the thinking. Well, I want to hit one thing on page 22, because I find this as a huge gap for agents. Measurement is the key to sustainability and a culture of accountability, because what we measure is going to go up, right? If we want to see improvement, we must measure it. So what is your scoreboard right now? How are you measuring your business? And what are the metrics required? Do you even know it? Because what we focus on expands. So measurement is the key to sustainability and a culture of accountability. You're going to find in this chapter, guys, A players crave accountability. And if we don't create that environment, you won't keep them. You're not going to attract them, nor will you develop into one. All right, the thinking time process. So he basically goes through and he gives us, here are the steps that you need to do to get prepared for a thinking time. The yellow pad, the place you're going to hold it, the time you're going to do it. What does that look like? So he gives his best practices. What were some ahas from that?
I'm going to make a thinking sign session thing for my door. I
Nice.
started thinking like ways that I can protect that time for myself if I were to time block it, because immediately I started thinking of the limiting beliefs that I couldn't make that happen in my schedule. And then I'm like, yeah, I could. I just needed to protect my environment and my time, like he had said.
Yep. Very good. Who else?
It's the whole idea of like working on your business and not just in your business. Like you can get so caught up in the day to day, like you're running around, you're doing this, you're doing that. And as realtors and, you know, self-employed people, like we work for ourselves. So if we don't slow down, nobody else is going to force us to.
Yep. And it's being proactive versus reactive. I talk all the time about how do we go to fireproofing instead of firefighting, right? And so that's asking ourselves really great questions. If we have the problem that keeps repeating itself, what's happening there? And then what do we need to do? What system has to be built? For anyone that's at Keller Williams, we have a GPS and a 411. So this goes perfectly with that process. If you were to take a Sunday and you were to really dive into asking yourself some questions and you were to be thoughtful about your 411 each month and each week, what could your life look like? Right? And then you build your calendar and you build your business around this process. So if you're not using this in conjunction with your 411 and your GPS, You should, because all these things can show up. And the 411 has personal and financial, not just business. And so these things can really cause your life to have dramatic effects if you take the time to do it. So fundamentally, thinking time is a structured process that enables us to minimize the risk, identify opportunities, and maximize our result. This is a pretty high return for a low cost investment, right? Anything else out of that chapter that you have a desire to share?
Well, I think the Keller Williams culture already says build a bunker, right? So it's just
Mhm.
repurposing your bunker.
Right, right. And what you're doing with that time.
Right.
So I had to laugh at the title of this chapter, Kool-Aid, because if you've been around KW for a long time, everybody used to say, oh, you're just drinking the Kool-Aid. And he's like, yeah, but it tastes good. So what did you get from Kool-Aid? It's one of my favorite chapters. Oh, man. All right. So most of us have the disciples that we tend to gravitate towards the path of least resistance, right? Most people, you're either avoiding pain or you're gravitating towards pleasure. So one of the better questions in this is where are we looking for the door marked wow? Because we're looking for a shortcut, right? And so we're looking for the door marked wow. We have to find a teacher or a coach that's going to illuminate the way so you don't have to make all the stupid and obvious mistakes ourselves. So this is saying, look, life's going to happen and it's somebody else has already been there for it. So who do we have right now with intention in our world for each key area of our life? When we think about the one thing, we have 7 key areas. Have you been on purpose to go find a mentor for all 7 of those key areas of our lives and ask them the questions so that you can avoid paying the price? That's the beautiful thing. In the MREA, they talk about standing on the shoulders of giants. What does that really mean? Somebody else has come before us. So we get to stand on that shoulder to go, oh, they've already lit in the way. So we can see the way through them. And that's having that coach and that mentor. So if you don't have that, you've got to get one right now. What were some other ahas from this?
I did like where he talks, just as the bumper sticker, be careful of who you take advice from, like really pay attention to who's in your circle, who you're listening to, and what kind of experience they have and whether they're just, talking a good game or whether, they really have the path that you want to try and follow.
Yeah. There were some pretty gut punching stories in here, right? For people like the 1998, Sergey Brin and Larry Page offered to sell their unknown startup technology to Yahoo for $1 million so they could return to their studies at Stanford, and Yahoo passed. 4 years later, Yahoo realized they made a mistake. They tried to buy Google for $3 billion, but Google boys would only sell it for $5 billion. Incredibly, Yahoo passed again. Today, Google is worth $600 billion. Given Yahoo's state of affairs, this is especially a poignant dumb tax, right? So who could they passed twice. So business is complex. We know this, and the future is unknown. So we have to identify what are tactical solutions and formulas that we need to, instead of giving ourselves general answers, we allow it to cripple our potential. So taking the time to really ask questions. And I highlighted hubris, arrogance, and self-confidence on steroids are typically the breakfast of failure, not success, right? So where are we allowing our ego to get in the way? Those guys passed on $5 billion for an opportunity of a $600 billion company. A world-class advisor will always tend to have better questions and fewer answers than your run-of-the-mill quack. So Shannon, who are we talking to, right? If we're coaching and consulting, are we asking people questions or are we attempting to provide the answers? So for me, I think about myself. I meet with top agents. Who's doing the majority of the talking? Am I getting better at asking people questions? So consultants have a recipe and masters have a cookbook. So what are any other ahas from this? Because I want to pull up some thinking time questions.
Well, you just took them
Do
all.
that.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Well, nobody was
The,
talking my favorite chapter.
I was trying to. There was it's kind of a culmination of every chapter before, as far as like, especially with those stories with Google and with everything else. But if you look at each one of them, with the hubris and everything you just talked about, they were emotional and they were irrational decisions. And if you when you're presented with it, sometimes things are time sensitive, but majority of the time we get to sit there and just kind of look at it and have that thinking time around it, and then ask that second question and that third question, like you were talking about earlier. And if they would have done that, maybe they would have seen what happens if I don't do this.
Mm-hmm. I love that, Logan. Anything else?
I like 2 of the questions in the thinking time I highlighted and put for advanced. So it'd be like really cool if we could review that. And what skills do we need to master to attain the success that we want? And where do we need to pick up the level of intensity and how we're playing this game? And those just even gave me chills to think about it. And it's awesome. Going into the last quarter, let's just see where we all are, and agents as well, because we're in that transitioning market where we need to up the intensity on certain levels with certain things.
Yep. Here and go ahead, Logan.
And one more thing, I think it was in this chapter. I couldn't remember if it was the number 4, because I think it relates directly to real estate. He talked about how we have the choice on what to do now, but we don't have a choice on what the consequence is after.
Mm-hmm.
And when we talk about lead generation or any of these different kind of things that, we need to do, as in my job, in real estate in general, in any job, we have a choice on whether or not to lead generate. We have zero choice on what the consequences are going to be if we decide not to. And so that was one big part that I read it, and I was like, ooh, a lot of people need to hear that one.
Mm-hmm. It always takes me back to what we do compounds, and so does what we don't do.
Mm-hmm.
And so we have to be making the decisions around what it is that we're doing and what are we not doing that we know we should be, which is one of the questions on here. So these are the 10 focusing questions that I picked up from chapters 1 through 5. And what I'd encourage you to do, if you don't have the book, or if because what I'm going to do is I'm going to accumulate these every 5 chapters, and then I'll share the PowerPoint with everybody. But these are 10 very powerful questions that you could take some time and really look at your business and look at your life and ask these questions. So if I can't change the environment, how can I play in the environment I'm in? What is happening that if it did happen would cause my business gaps to narrow or disappear? What don't I see? Where am I compromising looking for a door marked wow? What shortcuts are we attempting to take that really are not shortcuts, but a mirage of greed, laziness, or impatience? What skills do I need to master to attain the success I want? And realistically, how much additional time, practice are required for me to attain my outcomes? Who can I hire as a coach, mentor to hold me accountable? And where do I need to practice to improve my game, thus deserving the success I want? And last one, Tara just shared, where do we need to pick up the level of intensity and how we are playing this game? These are 10 really good questions. I would pick a couple, sit down this weekend or today, whatever time blocks you have, and really work through some of these. And don't just go surface level, scuba dive, as we say, don't snorkel. What questions, what are you overlooking? What don't you see? And spend some time on these. So hopefully you guys found today valuable. We're wrapping up here at the last 2 minutes, but if you don't have the book, grab the book and get into the next week's book club with this. I had does everybody know what chapters we're doing next week?
Mm-hmm.
Let's see. So we are chapter 6 through 10 next week, chapters 6 through 10, 8:30 back on the Zoom. Any other shares that you guys want to do before we hop off?
I'm glad that you said that it was at 4:30 because I had it on my calendar at 5, so I would have missed y'all.
I know they backed us up. So 4:30 tonight, Lad and I are going to be shaking up some drinks. Come on out to Waterman's, and then for Make-A-Wish, if you can't be there, donate. But thanks everybody for getting on. We'll see you next week at 8:30 Eastern. Bye, Miss Jana. Thanks for waking up early with us. Mwah.
Thank you.